letting go of control. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever noticed how tightly you hold on to things? Your plans, your goals, your image of who you think you should be. You hold on as though the very act of control keeps life from falling apart. But what if I told you that this grip, this endless effort to command the universe, is the very thing that creates your suffering? Imagine trying to hold water in your hand. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips away. Life is much the same. The more you try to control it, the more chaotic it becomes. The illusion of control, ladies and gentlemen. Most of us live our lives under a quiet but constant tension. The belief that we must keep everything under control. We wake up with plans, with goals, with expectations, and somewhere beneath all that, with fear. Fear that if we loosen our grip, everything will fall apart. We treat life like a machine that needs to be managed, adjusted, and supervised at all times. Yet the harder we try to control it, the more unpredictable it becomes. Have you ever noticed how when you plan something down to the last detail, life seems to laugh and take its own turn anyway? It's almost as if existence is reminding you, gently, or sometimes not so gently, that you are not in charge of the whole show. We have been taught since childhood that control equals safety, that mastery of life means commanding its direction. But this belief is born of illusion. Life, by its very nature, is fluid. It is not a system that can be tamed, it is a flow that must be experienced. The more we attempt to impose our will upon it, the more we create resistance. And resistance is suffering. The man who tries to control everything ends up controlled by his own fears. The woman who tries to secure every outcome finds herself imprisoned by uncertainty. We hold the rope so tightly that our hands bleed, never realizing that letting go is what would free us. The illusion of control is subtle because it hides behind noble ideas. We call it discipline, order, ambition. And yes, there is value in direction and effort. But the danger lies in the obsession to dominate every moment, to demand certainty from a reality that is built upon change. Life is movement. Seasons shift, tides turn, people evolve. Control is our attempt to freeze what must flow. It is like trying to catch the wind in a box. You can close the lid, but what you've trapped inside is only still air, not the living wind itself. Ladies and gentlemen, consider the mind. It wants answers, plans, and guarantees. It feeds on prediction and order because it fears chaos. But what it calls chaos is often just the natural rhythm of things. We try to control not because we are strong, but because we are afraid. We fear that without our grip, everything will collapse, our identities, our relationships, our purpose. Yet, strangely, the more we cling, the less alive we feel. Control gives the illusion of security, but it drains the joy of spontaneity. It suffocates the unknown, which is where all discovery lies. The illusion of control also extends to how we treat ourselves. We try to control our emotions, never to be too sad, too angry, too vulnerable. We try to control our image, to be seen a certain way, to be approved of, to fit into what others expect. But in doing so, we divide ourselves. We build walls within, rejecting parts of who we are in the name of appearing in control. Yet no one truly in harmony is in control. They are in balance. And balance, unlike control, is flexible. It moves, it bends, it adapts. There is a simple truth that most spend a lifetime resisting. Life was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to be lived. When you stand before the ocean, you do not try to stop the waves. You learn to swim. When you watch the stars, you do not rearrange the constellations. You find peace in their pattern. In the same way, the moments of your life are not there to be conquered, but to be witnessed. The tighter you grip, the more you suffer. The moment you release, you begin to see. To let go of control does not mean to surrender to chaos or to abandon responsibility. It means to align yourself with the deeper order that already exists. The order that does not come from your plans, but from the intelligence of life itself. The same force that opens a flower, that carries a river to the sea, that breathes through you without your command, is already guiding everything. You do not need to force it, you only need to trust it. When you begin to see through the illusion of control, something profound happens. The noise in your mind quiets. The world doesn't suddenly become perfect, but your relationship to it transforms. You stop fighting life, and instead you start dancing with it. The rhythm was always there, you were simply too busy trying to lead. The irony is that the moment you stop trying to control, you realize you were never separate from the flow to begin with. You were the flow, pretending to be the one holding it all together. And when that illusion fades, a great peace takes its place, the peace that comes not from mastering life, but from finally letting it move through you. The dance of existence, ladies and gentlemen. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a rhythm to be felt. Yet most people go through life as if it were a task to be completed, a system to be controlled, or a mountain to be conquered. We treat existence as though it is a mechanism, something we can engineer and perfect. But the truth is, life is not mechanical, it is musical. It does not move in straight lines, it moves in waves, in patterns, in rhythms. And if you try to control a rhythm, you destroy its beauty. The essence of music is not in its predictability, but in its flow. The melody of life cannot be grasped, it must be danced. When you begin to understand this, something remarkable happens. You stop asking life to obey your plans, and you begin to move with it. You realize that you are not a separate observer watching the world go by, but a participant in a grand cosmic dance. Every rise and fall, every joy and sorrow, every beginning and ending is part of this rhythm. To resist it is to stumble. To move with it is to find grace. The wise man does not force the dance, he listens to the music. He lets his body, his thoughts, his very being move in harmony with what is, not what he wishes it to be. Ladies and gentlemen, think of the sea. The waves rise and fall, but the ocean itself remains unchanged. When the storm comes, the water churns. When the sun returns, the surface calms. Yet beneath it all, the depths are still. Life, too, moves in this way. There are moments of turbulence, moments of calm, and beneath them all, a stillness that never changes. When we try to control the waves, we exhaust ourselves. But when we learn to flow with them, we find that every motion, no matter how chaotic, has its own rhythm, its own beauty. The dance of existence is not always gentle. Sometimes it throws you into fire, into loss, into the unknown. And the mind immediately resists. It says, this should not be happening. But who are we to say what should or should not be? The flower does not argue with the rain. The night does not resist the coming dawn. Each plays its part perfectly, without complaint. And so must we. When you realize that everything, even your struggles, are part of the same dance, something within you softens. You stop fighting life, and in that surrender you discover freedom. Control is an illusion born from fear, but the dance requires trust. When you dance, you do not need to see the entire floor. You simply move with the next step. The music carries you. The same is true with existence. You do not need to know what will happen tomorrow, next week, or next year. You only need to be fully present in this step, this breath, this moment. The universe has been dancing long before you were born and will continue long after you are gone. Your role is not to lead the dance, but to feel it, to let it move through you, to let it express itself as you. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever noticed how effortless life becomes when you stop resisting? When you stop trying to control every outcome, things begin to align in ways you never expected. The right people arrive. The right opportunities unfold. Even the obstacles reveal their lessons. This is not magic. It is the natural flow of life when you are in tune with it. But when you fight the rhythm, when you try to rush what needs time, or cling to what must end, you step out of sync. You lose the dance. The music never stops, but you stop hearing it. To live in harmony with the dance of existence is to realize that joy and sorrow are not opposites, but partners. They take turns leading. One day you are lifted by laughter, and the next bowed by grief. Yet both are movements in the same song. Without one, the other could not exist. Life's beauty is not in its perfection, but in its motion, in the eternal play of opposites that create balance. When you understand this, you no longer seek to escape the difficult moments. You begin to see them as part of the rhythm, as essential as the moments of ease. And so, the art of living is the art of dancing. To move with the flow of life, to feel its rhythm without clinging or resisting, is to find peace amidst change. You do not need to choreograph the universe, you only need to let it move you. Every experience, every success, every failure, every heartbreak is a step in the dance. When you see this, fear dissolves. You realize there is nothing to control, nothing to hold on to. The dance itself is the meaning, and the music never ends. As the nature of flow, ladies and gentlemen, there is a rhythm to all things, a quiet intelligence that moves through every moment, every breath, every beat of existence. It is what we call flow, the natural unfolding of life when we stop resisting it. Most people never experience it, because they are too busy trying to control everything. They move through life like swimmers fighting the current, exhausting themselves against a tide that was never meant to be fought. Yet the moment they surrender, the moment they stop struggling, something miraculous happens. They are carried effortlessly. Life begins to move through them instead of against them. That is the nature of flow. Flow is not something you create, it is something you allow. It is always present, always moving, always guiding. But the mind, in its constant effort to dominate, blocks it. The mind wants structure, certainty, direction, but flow operates through openness, spontaneity, and trust. You cannot plan flow, you can only enter it. And to enter it, you must first let go. Let go of your expectations, your fears, your desire to control the outcome. The river does not need to be told where to go. It finds its own path, and so must we. Ladies and gentlemen, consider the difference between forcing and allowing. Forcing is born of fear. Fear that if you don't act, nothing will happen. Allowing is born of trust. Trust that life knows what it's doing. When you are forcing, your energy is tense, narrow, resistant. When you are in flow, your energy is open, fluid, and creative. Things begin to happen not because you are pushing them, but because you are aligned with them. You begin to meet life, not as an opponent to be conquered, but as a partner to be danced with. The nature of flow is effortless effort. Action without strain. Think of the artist painting, the musician playing, the dancer moving. When they are in flow, they are not thinking about each brushstroke or step. They have surrendered thought to presence. The body, the mind, the spirit all move as one. Time disappears, and only the act remains. This is not laziness, it is the highest form of intelligence. To act without resistance, to move in harmony with the moment. The same intelligence that paints the sky at sunset and brings the tide to shore is moving through you, if only you would stop getting in its way. Flow cannot be reached through effort, it is reached through awareness. When you are truly present, when you are not trying to escape the moment or shape it into something else, you begin to feel the pulse of life itself. You realize that there is no separation between you and what is happening. You are not the observer of the flow. You are the flow. The river is not outside you. It is within you, carrying you from one experience to the next. The resistance you feel in life does not come from the river. It comes from the parts of you that cling to the rocks of certainty. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a deep wisdom in flow, a knowing that things unfold at their own pace. Flowers bloom when they are ready, not when they are told to. The rain falls when the clouds are full, not when we demand it. Yet humans have forgotten this simplicity. We rush, we plan, we predict, all in the name of control, and in doing so, we step out of harmony. The moment you stop rushing, stop grasping, you return to your natural state, one of ease, one of alignment. In that state, everything begins to unfold more perfectly than you could have ever arranged. To live in flow does not mean to be passive. It means to be responsive. The one in flow listens, watches, feels, and acts at the right time. They are not lazy, they are attuned, they do not force outcomes, they sense openings. They know that life has its seasons, times to act, times to wait, times to rise, and times to fall. They do not cling to one over the other, for they see that both are needed to complete the dance. Flow is not about control, but cooperation. Cooperation with the larger intelligence that moves through all things. When you begin to live this way, you feel lighter. The burden of control begins to dissolve. You no longer live as a soldier battling existence, but as a wave moving with the sea. You realize that the same current that guides the stars is guiding you. You start to trust that even when things fall apart, they are falling into place. Life stops being a struggle and becomes a song. And you, instead of trying to conduct it, finally become part of the music. This is the beauty of flow. It doesn't take you away from life, it brings you back to it, to its rhythm, its grace, and its endless, effortless unfolding. The self ego and the fear of losing control. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest obstacle to peace, to freedom, to flow, is the ego's desperate need to control. The ego is not who you truly are. It is the mask you wear to protect yourself from uncertainty. It is the voice that whispers, I must manage everything, I must be seen, I must be safe. The ego believes it is the doer, the thinker, the planner, the one holding the strings of existence. It cannot bear the thought of losing control, because to lose control feels like death to it. The ego survives only through control, through maintaining the illusion that it is the center of the universe, that everything must revolve around its will. And so it grasps, it fights, it resists. When life begins to shift in ways the ego cannot predict, fear rises. It is not the fear of what is actually happening, but the fear of losing its illusion of power. The ego says, I must fix this. I must hold it together. I cannot let go. Yet the more it clings, the more life slips through its fingers. The ego cannot control the flow of existence any more than one can hold the wind in their hands. It tries to dominate, to manipulate, to direct. But life, in its infinite wisdom, moves beyond its reach. And so the ego feels threatened, fragile, anxious. This is the root of suffering, the war between the ego's desire for control and life's insistence on freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, the ego fears letting go because it confuses surrender with annihilation. It believes that if it stops controlling, everything will collapse. The world, its identity, its sense of importance. But letting go is not destruction, it is revelation. When you loosen the grip of the ego, you do not lose yourself. You discover the vastness that was hidden behind the mask. You realize that the one who was trying to control was never the real you. The real self is the awareness that watches it all. Calm, unshaken, infinite. The ego's control is an illusion built on fear. Awareness needs no control because it is already whole. The ego, in its insecurity, seeks certainty. It wants to know what comes next, how things will unfold, how to avoid pain and guarantee pleasure. But life does not work that way. The more the ego demands guarantees, the more anxious it becomes, for life offers none. Life offers only presence. This moment, this breath, this heartbeat. Everything else is imagination. The ego cannot live with that uncertainty. It trembles in the face of the unknown. And yet the unknown is where truth lives. The unknown is where growth happens. The ego's fear of losing control is, in truth, the fear of meeting life as it is, wild, unpredictable, alive. To live beyond the ego's fear is to see that control is an illusion born of separation. The ego sees itself as separate from the world, a self surrounded by others, a subject surrounded by objects. It believes it must control what is outside to protect what is inside. But this division is false. There is no outside. You are not a fragment of existence. You are existence itself, expressing through a form. When you see this, the need for control dissolves naturally. You stop trying to dominate the river and instead realize that you are part of its current. Ladies and gentlemen, the ego's fear also manifests in subtle ways. It hides behind perfectionism, behind overthinking, behind the constant need to be right. It creates identities. The achiever, the victim, the savior. Each one designed to preserve its illusion of control. But every identity, no matter how strong, eventually cracks under the weight of truth. Because control, no matter how convincing, is temporary. The moment will always slip through your fingers because it was never meant to be held. The ego calls that loss. The soul calls it liberation. When the fear of losing control arises, look closely. Do not run from it. Watch it as you would a storm passing across the sky. You will see that beneath the turbulence, there is something still, a silent awareness that watches without judgment. That stillness is your true nature. The ego fights to control, awareness simply observes. The ego grasps, awareness flows. The more you identify with awareness, the less power fear has over you. The ego believes control brings safety, but it brings only suffering. It traps you in a cage of your own making, constantly worrying about what might happen next, constantly defending an identity that is not real. True safety comes not from control, but from connection, the realization that you are inseparable from life itself. When you understand this, fear loses its grip. You no longer need to manage the storm, you are the sky that contains it. The fear of losing control is the fear of returning to your natural state, to openness, to trust, to flow. The ego resists this because it cannot exist without control. But the moment you see through it, even for an instant, something shifts. You begin to laugh at the absurdity of ever thinking you were in charge. You begin to see that life has always been moving perfectly, with or without your interference. The trees grow, the heart beats, the earth turns, and none of it asks for permission. When you finally understand that, you stop trying to control the dance and begin to move with it. The fear dissolves, and in its place, a deep peace emerges. The peace of being exactly where you are, with nothing to hold on to and nothing to lose. Thus, trusting the unknown, ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every life when the familiar begins to fade, when the plans we made unravel, when the road ahead disappears into fog, when what once felt solid begins to dissolve beneath our feet. In that moment, fear rises, for the mind depends on certainty to feel safe. It wants to know, to define, to predict. Yet life, in its infinite wisdom, refuses to be tamed by our expectations. It is always larger, wilder, and more mysterious than we imagine. To trust the unknown is to step into this mystery with open hands, to walk forward even when the next step cannot be seen. It is to live not by control but by faith, not blind faith in dogma or doctrine, but faith in the intelligence of life itself. The unknown frightens us because we have been conditioned to believe that safety lies in what is familiar. But the familiar is only memory, a shadow of what once was. The unknown is where life truly happens. Every discovery, every act of creation, every awakening begins in the unknown. The seed does not know what it will become, yet it trusts the soil. The bird does not map the wind before it flies. It leaps and lets the air carry it. Trust is not built on guarantees. It is built on surrender. It is saying, I may not understand what is happening, but I know it belongs to something greater than my fear. Ladies and gentlemen, the unknown is not against you. It is not chaos waiting to consume you. It is the birthplace of everything beautiful. The mind paints it as darkness because it cannot see beyond itself, but in truth, the unknown is light, vast, limitless potential waiting to unfold. To trust it is to allow life to reveal itself in ways you could never design. When you insist on knowing, you confine yourself to the boundaries of the known, and the known is always too small for the vastness of who you are. The unknown, on the other hand, stretches you. It dissolves your walls. It invites you to expand beyond what you think you can be. Trusting the unknown does not mean you stop feeling fear. It means you stop letting fear guide you. Fear is the natural trembling of the ego as it faces the infinite. It says, if I step into what I cannot see, I will lose myself. But what the ego calls loss, the soul calls awakening. Every ending, every uncertainty, every empty space you have ever faced has always carried within it the seed of something new. The mind calls it uncertainty. Life calls it transformation. The flower must break through the darkness of the soil before it reaches the light. You too must pass through uncertainty to discover your own light. When you trust the unknown, you begin to live with a sense of wonder. You stop demanding answers and start asking deeper questions. You stop clinging to control and start listening. You realize that life is not happening to you. It is happening through you. The river does not resist its own flow, it simply moves where it must. The same current that carries galaxies across the stars carries your heart from one moment to the next. You do not need to understand the entire journey to take the next step. You only need to trust that the ground will appear beneath your feet when it is time. Ladies and gentlemen, look back at your life. Think of all the moments when things did not go according to plan, and yet somehow they led you exactly where you needed to be. You thought you were lost, but you were being redirected. You thought life was falling apart, but it was falling into place. Trust is born when you begin to see that the unknown has never failed you. It has only transformed you. Every disappointment was a doorway. Every loss was a lesson. Every detour was divine timing. You may not have seen it then, but you can see it now. That is the quiet genius of the unknown. To live in trust is to live without walls. It is to welcome each moment, joy or sorrow, certainty or confusion, as a messenger of growth. You no longer demand that life fits your plans. You begin to align with its rhythm. You stop saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to show me?" You begin to realize that life is not random. It is profoundly intentional. The unknown is not emptiness. It is the space where miracles take form. Trust is the bridge between fear and freedom. The more you trust, the lighter you become. You stop clinging to what must go and stop fearing what must come. You begin to see that you were never meant to control the path, only to walk it. The unknown ceases to be a threat and becomes your teacher, your companion, your doorway into deeper peace. And when you can finally stand before it, trembling perhaps, but open, you discover something extraordinary. The unknown has been your home all along. The freedom beyond control. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine for a moment that you are standing beside a river. You watch as the water moves, effortlessly, gracefully, never asking where it must go, never resisting the rocks that appear in its path. It flows around them, over them, through them. It does not stop to calculate, to worry, or to cling. It simply moves. This is the essence of true freedom, the kind that exists beyond control. It is not rebellion, nor is it passivity. It is the deep understanding that life does not need to be managed for it to unfold beautifully. To reach that understanding is to discover a peace so profound that control becomes irrelevant. Freedom beyond control begins with the realization that control was always an illusion. The mind believes it can command the future, direct outcomes, and secure guarantees, yet every moment reminds us that the universe does not obey our will. The sun rises without our permission, the tides shift without our consent, the heart beats without our command. The same intelligence that governs these vast movements governs our own lives, yet we resist it, believing we know better. The need for control is born of fear. The fear that without it, everything will fall apart. But, ladies and gentlemen, it is only when things fall apart that we see what was never truly held together. When you surrender the need to control, you are not abandoning responsibility, you are returning to alignment. You begin to act not from anxiety but from awareness. Your actions become expressions of harmony rather than desperation. Control is born of the ego's need to impose its will upon reality, but freedom arises when you recognize that you and reality are not two. You are part of the same dance, moving in rhythm with a force infinitely wiser than thought. When you stop trying to lead the dance and instead listen to the music, something miraculous happens. Life begins to move through you rather than against you. The freedom beyond control is not loud, it is quiet, subtle, unshakable. It is the stillness that remains even when the storm rages. It is the ability to act without attachment to outcome, to love without fear of loss, to speak without needing approval. When you live in that space, you are no longer a prisoner of circumstance. You are free because nothing external determines your peace. You begin to understand that life does not have to bend to your will for it to be perfect. It already is. Freedom is not found in mastering life, but in surrendering to it. Ladies and gentlemen, to live without control is to rediscover your natural state. Watch a child play, unburdened, spontaneous, alive. They do not calculate how to be joyful. They simply are. That purity still exists within you, buried beneath layers of fear, expectation, and conditioning. The freedom beyond control is a return to that innocence, not in ignorance, but in wisdom. It is knowing that life takes care of itself when you stop trying to control it. The stars do not need instruction to shine, nor do you. When you live this way, your relationship with time changes. You stop chasing the future and regretting the past. You begin to inhabit the present fully, because that is where freedom lies. Control is always about elsewhere, what might happen, what should have happened, but freedom is only ever about now. In the space of now, there is no control and no need for it. There is only life unfolding and you awake within it. Freedom beyond control also means embracing uncertainty with grace. The ego trembles before uncertainty, but the awakened heart welcomes it as adventure. To live without control is to trust that whatever arises is part of your becoming. Even pain, loss, and failure are no longer enemies, they are invitations. You begin to see that every wave, no matter how fierce, carries you closer to truth. You do not need to resist the current when you understand that it knows the way better than you do. This freedom is not something to achieve, it is something to remember. It is already here beneath the tension of your grasping, beneath the noise of your mind. It reveals itself the moment you exhale and stop trying to make life fit your plans. You realize that the universe has always been holding you, even in chaos, even in silence, even in loss. The need for control dissolves not because you have conquered life, but because you finally see that life was never your opponent. Ladies and gentlemen, when you reach this understanding, you do not become passive, you become powerful. Not with the brittle strength of domination, but with the quiet strength of harmony. You begin to move with life's rhythm instead of against it. You speak from intuition rather than calculation. You love without defenses. You act without fear. The river flows, and you flow with it, no longer fighting to direct its path. You have become the current itself, free, vast, uncontainable. That is the freedom beyond control, the state where the burden of constant management falls away, and what remains is a deep, effortless participation in the mystery of existence. It is the freedom of being fully alive, without needing to grasp, without needing to know, without needing to win. It is the freedom of being exactly as you are, in a universe that has never asked you to be anything else.